to be with my papa under the talis, you know, when he is davening and he would sort of hug me, was such a moment, a recognition that the universe is a good universe, that I'm at home. Seeing my mother light candles as a child, uh, knowing that she was talking to someone who really was there, you know, was an important thing. So it made me feel that I could also talk to God. And I would sometimes, when my cousin, my aunt didn't let me play with my cousin, I would get back on the staircase and talk to God, how unfair it is, But it was a very real thing. As a child, I would walk by a little side chapel in a big church, and the ladies would be lighting candles and standing like my mama did on Shabbos. And Papa would take me to shul with the men. So I had this notion that women are Catholic and men are Jewish. This is childish, but there was something very special about that. That when people are praying, that this thing is important, to be able to talk to God. Once I was under Papa's tallis I looked under the tallis when he had just finished leading a Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur service, and I saw tears in his eyes, and I says, "Papa, warum weinst du?" In German, "Why are you crying?" And he says, "I just talked with God." And I asked him, "Does it hurt when you talk with God?" This is how a child goes. And he says, "No." "So why did you cry?" It's because I remember such a long time since I really talked with him. So one Shabbos afternoon, I went with my friends out into the open, and it hit me as for a moment I saw like the curtain part, and I could see why God has to hide and why it is also, and I knew at that point. And Jews don't get on their knees, but I got on my knees, despite the fact that we say "Vanachnu korim shtachavim modim," and I prayed, "Please God, don't let me ever forget this, what I saw right now." That was a very important part of that.
Tell me what was going on. Where were you? Who were you with?
Outdoors, it was sort of a picnic ground, a park. And my friends were on the side, and I had just gone a little bit on, it's like almost as if an aura of awareness was starting to come down. And then I saw why it has to be the way it is, and I was willing and deeply satisfied to allow it to be that way.
What do you feel you came to understand in that experience? Like what?
It didn't go that way. It made a matrix. You see, there's always the question of the theophany and how you work out the theology. So I like to say that theology is the afterthought of the believer. So the afterthoughts grew, and they can go incrementally. The more I learned about Chassidus, Kabbalah, the inner world, the many higher worlds, and so on and so forth. Then that gave it more, how would I say, more structure.
Yeah.
But the intuition is not what happens in the cortex,
Yeah. No, and I asked the question not clearly, because I didn't mean the theology. I literally meant what in your core did you understand? What at that moment?
That I am known and being seen and worthwhile to the Creator. If I put it, that's already words, But that's very much what it's like, yeah. Like in that thing, you're a child of the universe and you have a right to be here. My father was first deported to Poland after Kristallnacht. And he smuggled himself back to Vienna because he didn't want to go into Poland. He knew Poland was destruction. So he and my brother and I and several members of the family went because he couldn't stay there because having been deported, it was, if they would have caught him, he would have been in trouble. So we went to Cologne and we paid 1,000 mark a person to a smuggler to take us across. We were told where to go and we went and we walked past a German border guard to the place where we were supposed to meet the smuggler who never showed up. And the sun was about to set, and going back was not advisable. And we davened mincha. Okay? The way I davened mincha at that time was very, very much Ein lanu lihisha'en el avinu shebashamayim. And to our relief, that after we were finished with mincha, there came a smuggler, not our smuggler, but a smuggler who was about to take some like us into Belgium to sell. And he wouldn't take us unless we gave him the last 10 mark we were permitted to take out. So we gave him all the money that we had. He took us across, and so that's another part of the story, but that was such a moment. It was until I got to be a teacher at the Lubavitcher Yeshiva in New Haven that I came across a book called, I was trying to go to the library and get something about educational psychology, so I could be a better teacher. And I saw on the recent acquisitions a book that was called Difficulties in Mental Prayer by Father Eugene Boylan of Melleray Abbey in Ireland. So I grabbed that book, who knows, from Difficulties in Mental Prayer. The rest of the Chassidim don't know about. Maybe the only ones I knew who cared about stuff like that were the Chabad people, so I got into that. Christianity had for me both an aversion and an attraction. I would sometimes go to a Quaker meeting and get deeply moved by that. Then I started to go to Boston University. This is how I met Howard Thurman, and that was, I called him my Schwarzer Rebbe, It was very important to me. And what could I say? He challenged me at one point. I didn't know whether I should take a class with labs and open myself to someone who's a missionary. Those goyim, you can't trust them, right? They'll want to convert you. So I come in and see him and I ask, I want to take your class, but I don't know if my anchor chains are long enough. So he looks at his hand back and forth for 5 minutes. This is very dark, this one is light. And finally, he says to me, don't you trust the Ruach HaKodesh? He used those words. So that was a very important thing. When I went to Cincinnati for my working on my doctorate, I'd go to Bardstown, cross to Kentucky, and then from there get a cab to Gethsemane Abbey, and that was wonderful.
What was he like, or what was your experience of him? What did you learn from him?
Well, the first thing is I had, in those days, there was the picture we had of Pope Pius, the last Pope Pius, with his eagle nose and his severe face. And I figured this guy who wrote the 7-Story Mountain must be like that, But I had written to him that I wanted to meet him. So in the morning, we meet at that desk where I was to meet him. He taps me on the shoulder and I turn around and I see somebody who could be like a football coach, He didn't have that and a big grin and smile, and he'd take me up to his place that he called Shangri-La. That was his hermitage and so on. Later on, I met the Berrigan brothers there. That was wonderful.
What did you What did you learn about faith from Thomas Merton?
First of all, there's a way of. Sounds funny if I say it. You show me yours, I show you mine. There was an element of. He was a convert to Roman Catholicism, and he had such a beautiful sense of going into the liturgy. So if you read Seven Storey Mountains and all the other things, he would have entries into his diary from the daily liturgy that was there, and that was very impressive. I asked Merton, "How do you understand Trinity?" He says, "Well, to me it means when I say the Creator is God the Father. When I speak of the Redeemer, it's God the Son. I speak of the Revealer, that's God the Holy Spirit. No, who can argue with that? Taka, he reveals, he creates, you know, he redeems. I don't have tinus about that. There's always, I found a way of accommodating that. Faith gets barnacles of superstition. Doubt is what scrapes them off, because it always makes sure that you don't go into beliefs, but you go to faith. Beliefs are a whole bunch of beliefs, and you can make beliefs without number. I believe this, and these are affirmations we do in order to keep ourselves from being in great anxiety. Faith is not something we have. Faith is a faithing, it's a verb. And unless we are faithing, it's not there. The doubts don't come, they may have been earlier for me, like, do I want to throw it all away? I've got enough lifetime understanding about the evanescence of the moment, and at the same time the guidelines that see you through, and the deep commitment that I've made to see it through, that this lifetime I'm going to be a Jew.